Okay, and with that, we'll call the meeting to order. It is different times all around. We'll call it 6:05.
Commissioner Met is absent. Commissioner Basinger,
Here.
Commissioner Blythe,
Here.
and Chair Metzen.
Here. Okay. I'm starting off with the.
I think we had a separate agenda item.
Okay. Start with public comments. Does anyone have any public comments not related to items on the agenda? Okay. If not, we'll go on to communication.
Yes, so I will be deferring to Laura and Bill for the communication.
Thank you very much. So as you know, the city received a request for nomination for the local designation of 2 buildings on the Public Works operations site. The first is for the community cannery and the second is for the workshop annex. They're both located in the upper yard of the site. And I wanted to give you a brief update on that. As required in our code, we provided notice to the HRB once the application was received. The application was submitted by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and once the city received the application, we went to work. And we researched it quite a bit. We spoke to the State Historic Preservation Office. We spoke to the Adair Living History, and on that is a group of people who look at Camp Adair, as well as people from the city of Adair Village. Actually, let me back up one second. So these 2 buildings that received a nomination for were associated with the Camp Adair. So they were once located in Camp Adair, which is near Corvallis, Oregon. It was a Army World War II training facility from 1942. And when they constructed Camp Adair, they built a lot of buildings. 2 of those buildings found themselves on site at Public Works Operations Facility in Oregon City. And so the request was to nominate them locally, not on the National Register, just locally. And so once the city received that, again, we spoke to SHPO and did quite a bit of research there. We spoke to the Adair Living History. We also spoke with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. We spoke with Fort Vancouver. We spoke with Clackamas Community College and Restore Oregon. And not only did we speak with them, we took members from most of those agencies on tours to really learn what the history of these buildings are and if it was appropriate for historic designation locally. We learned that the structures had been obviously removed from their original context, which is a tough hurdle for historic designation, right? You take them out of their original context and it's hard to understand their importance as much. We also learned that the structures had been changed quite a bit since they were originally constructed with new roofing material and windows and doorways. We learned that they were constructed with a very utilitarian design and they were constructed for a minimal lifespan. We received some comment from state archaeologists with ODF&W who said that they were impressed that they lasted more than 10 years. So they had a good thing going to this point. We also received comment from SHPO that they're not eligible for the National Register. They don't meet the needs of public works operations. They're small. A lot of their equipment can't fit in them. And we also wanted to honor the public process that we had previously gone through for the Public Works operations site. As you know, there was a master plan previously, and there were a lot of public meetings and input to understand how we're going to use the site. So because of that, the city refused to consent to this nomination. And I'll have Bill talk about that in just a second. But essentially that means that the Historic Review Board can no longer consider the historic nomination at all. And instead, the city is pursuing a couple of paths. One is we want to find a good home for these structures. So we will be offering them up to anyone who can have the resources to move them feasibly from the site. So we'll be posting in a couple of newspapers that these structures are available for people to deconstruct and remove and reconstruct somewhere on site. The goal is to keep the structures intact and not to piece them out. So that is our first need that we'll be doing. So we're offering them for free through December 31st of this year. So people will have a significant amount of time to really move them off-site. If that doesn't work and we can't find a feasible home for them, then we would look at deconstructing the buildings. We would first want to offer up any materials to any other entity that has existing Camp-A-Dare buildings, and then we could offer them up to other entities. We do commit to keeping, if they get deconstructed, keeping parts of those buildings on site for some type of interpretation. And I just want our City Attorney Bill Kobeisman to just say a couple words about what the refusal to consent means to you.
Thank you, Chair Metzen and board members. It's a pleasure to get to meet you and actually talk to you. It's been a while since I've been at the HRB, but I do want to talk about the statewide process for historic designation. It's been an issue throughout the state for a number of years, and back in 1995, the Oregon legislature passed a law, and it was later amended in 2001 about consent to designate. And there's actually a recent case out of Lake Oswego about a year ago about this. But I want to read to you the statute about designation and what it means. And here's the language. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, a local government shall allow, so they're required to allow a property owner to refuse to consent to any form of historic property designation at any point during the designation process. Such refusal to consent shall remove the property from any form of consideration for historic property designation under a state law or other law, except for consideration. So once that refusal to consent comes in, that prevents any further consideration of the nomination. And so we've got an application, but the refusal to consent under state law means that it can't be considered further. The city can certainly take other steps, so as the owner to preserve it, but in terms of the historic designation, it's not an option for the HRB of the city to designate it as a historic resource at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Did staff have anything to add to that?
No, just that this was under the communication item, as you noticed on the agenda, and not under public comment, just to provide you that update. So we did not create a staff report on this or do any further processing once we have that letter.
We did have one comment form on this agenda item, and I will invite Jesse to come up and speak on behalf of the neighborhood association.
Thank you.
Yeah, timer, and you have 5 minutes. Just to be sure that you are speaking on behalf of the neighborhood association?
Yes.
Has there been a vote?
There was a vote at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a packet here. I've already given one to staff, so there should be 5. Well, there's only 3 of you, so there should be enough for Laura and Bill.
Okay.
There's 3.
There you go. Thank you.
Time started. Time started. Name and address for the record.
My address is 215 Washington, here in Oregon City.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Metzen and Board. I am here as the authorized representative of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and wanted to express strong disagreement about the legal process that was just explained to you by the city attorney. The packet in front of you contains a few different documents, so I'll just walk through it page by page. The first page you're looking at is a letter titled Determination of Application Completeness, sent from Trevor to McLaughlin Neighborhood Association in March, and it confirmed that the application was deemed complete on March 23rd. It goes on to say that a hearing would be happening before this body today, and this item was originally scheduled to be a quasi-judicial Type 3 hearing, which would have required notice to certain people under the code. Of course, because the hearing was canceled, none of that notice went out. This couldn't be a proper Type 3 hearing, even if I wanted it to be or anyone else wanted it to be. But that's what it originally was going to be under this letter of complete. The second page is dated April 18th, and it's addressed to Denise McGriff, who's the chair of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, signed, not this version, but sent by Tony Conkle, the city manager. And this goes on to generally state what Mr. Geisman told you a few minutes ago, which is that the city is refusing the historic designation under the law and purports to revoke your authority to consider the application. And this letter also cites state law ORS 197.772 subsection 1 for that proposition. And that's what Attorney Geisman just spoke to you about a few minutes ago. The next page contains an actual copy of ORS 197.772, which is 3 sections. And section 3 there is the section that was litigated in the Lake Oswego Preservation Society, which Mr. Geisman talked about, was handed down by the Oregon Supreme Court last year. But the terms used in this statute are very similar in sections 1, 2, and 3, and I'm just going to read section 1. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, a local government shall allow a property owner to refuse to consent to any form of historic property designation at any point during the designation process. Such refusal to consent shall remove the property from any form of consideration for historic property designation under the following statutes or other law, except for consideration or nomination to the National Register, as Mr. Geisman explained. Now, the next page is just the cover sheet to the Lake Oswego Preservation Society case. I didn't want to include the entire thing because I think it would be about 26 pages front and back. This just shows you the front page and the date it was decided. That case focuses on the meaning of the term property owner in the statute that I just read. And that statute makes a distinction between the term local government and the term property owner. In the Lake Oswego Preservation Society case, the court went into in-depth analysis of the legislative history of those 1995 legislative changes that resulted in that statute, focused on what was the intent of the legislature in passing the statute. And it was very clear from the court's discussion that the intent in passing the statute was to protect private property rights, not public property rights. The legislation in 1995 actually stemmed from a Yamhill County ordinance, which went up on a separate appeal, and ultimately the state legislature was trying to overrule that case. But it all stemmed from private property owners in Yamhill County that wanted the right to consent to historic designation. But the court focused on private property rights and takings, none of which applies to public property. If you turn the page to the last 2 pages, this one's actually front and back. This is a copy of our local code, the designation procedure for historic review of a landmark, which is what McLaughlin Neighborhood Association has submitted here. I'm running out of time, but to summarize, this designation procedure requires this body to make a decision on an application for a landmark designation. The city manager does not have the authority to revoke permission under the statute, even if that statute did apply to public property. So the official request of the Neighborhood Association is that this board should direct staff to set the application for a Type 3 quasi-judicial hearing.
I'm going to have to pause
next
you there.
month.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have to agree with City's Council and the city, being the steward of that public property, is responsible for making the decision for it. And our hands are tied, but I do agree with City's Council. With that, we will move on to item 4, our public hearing. And I will read a statement here. Please bear with me. The following is public hearings on land use applications are scheduled tonight. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Commission will follow is set in the state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart to the side. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the plaintiff staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply, in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the public record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized posters, boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right. Now we open the public record for Oregon City file number PC 17046, HR 1704, Historic Review Board request for Phase 1 proposal of Public Works operation facility. Does any commissioner have an ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statements to declare?
No.
I don't.
And is there anybody in the audience who wishes to challenge the board's position?
Okay. Has any commissioner visited the site? I have. Okay. Okay. Well, and with that, I will turn it over to you, Trevor. Thank you.
So, hello, my name is Trevor Martin, planner with the Oregon City Planning Division. Tonight we'll be reviewing HR 1704, which is a proposal for a new public works facility in the McLaughlin Conservation District. I'd like to preface this by starting out that the Historic Review Board's scope in this application is looking at more or less the design of the project. They're looking at the design and the appropriateness of the design and how that design applies to the McLaughlin standards. We're not going to be so much examining the use or the master plan that exists. So I just want to preface with that. I'm not going to read the whole thing. This is just a brief description of the project. The project will be mainly focusing on the upper yard, which is right here. So the project's going to be mostly focusing on the upper yard of the site. And the idea here is to remove all the existing buildings except for the armory and place new buildings on the site. So, a little more background. McLaughlin Conservation District, commonly referred to as the second level. It's when people first moved to Oregon City, they eventually moved up into the McLaughlin neighborhood in the 1850s and 1860s. Beginning in 1982, the McLaughlin neighborhood sought to get a historic conservation district designation, which they did achieve in 1986. And a little more fun facts: there are approximately 153 blocks in the McLaughlin Conservation District, and 121 of those which are from the original plat of Oregon City. A little bit more background. The site that we're looking at today is directly adjacent Waterboard Park. This project, as far as staff can tell, is not going to be requesting to change any of those boundaries. It's the existing site as Public Works sits right now. And when addressing the site, this is more or less what we were talking about. So it's the upper yard, the lower yard, the two parking lots, a separate lot over here, and then a separate access lot to the side. Overall, this is a phased project, 3 phases. This phase is going to be addressing phase 1. Phase 1 will be separate, 2 is separate, and 3 is separate. So if and when phase 2 comes, the area within phase 2, which is more or less along the street, will be reviewed in front of the Historic Review Board, and the designs and the appropriateness will be again reviewed at that time. Same with phase 3.
And I just wanted to state one thing regarding that, just to clarify again that it's not within the Historic Review Board's purview to look at the master plan. What is in your purview is to look at development as it occurs. And so just phase 1 for now.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is just some more clarity. So this is the lower yard. This is the portion that we will not be focusing on today. This is phase 2, which is to be determined at a future date. This is the part we'll be focusing on today, the upper yard. A little bit of more information and to the context of the area. You can see here, this is access to the site from John Adams. The existing cannery building, or one of the Campo Dare buildings. The existing armory here, and maintenance facility, or maintenance building, I should say. These are all on-site items. And then here are some of the homes that are directly or near the site, along John Adams up here, and then more homes along John Adams. So this is an overall site plan, just again, more background on the overall project. The area that we're going to be focusing on today is this area throughout here, the upper yard. And this is just a site plan showing kind of how they are planning to move ahead with this project. So there's the office building, tool storage, truck storage, and the existing armory. Again, another site plan. So jumping in, so the project is looking at constructing a new office building, which is found here, a new tool storage building, which would be connected to the office building via breezeway, a truck shed here, and reuse of the armory right here. The escarpment or cliff bluff is more or less this line right here. So when traveling along Center Street, the primary building that will be seen would be this office building from the street. It's going to be an elevated view. I should also mention that the elevator is also a part of this application, which would be extending out from the office building right here. So these would be the primary structures that would be seen from the center street. These other buildings, if we go back here, you can see there's existing landscaping, and they'd be tucked back behind that line, that bluff line. So here is a submitted elevation from Center Street from what I was just talking about. So the idea here is here's Center Street, and to kind of outline the visible portions of the proposed development. So looking at a portion of the elevator from Center Street, and then looking at the office building from Center Street. Moving along to the buildings individually. So this is the proposed office building. Looking at it here, and I do have some materials that the applicant has submitted, and I'll get to those in just a minute. But looking at the building here, the proposal is to use not, I could say, materials that don't really conflict with the standards set forth by the McLaughlin vernacular style. They're steel, they're man-made stone materials, they're man-made brick materials, and actually I'll pull them out right now, but these are some of the color samples that the applicant has submitted. So gray tones for as far as siding and roofing goes, and I'll pass these to you. So some more materials. And again, these are just more white and gray insulation materials. And then the man-made stone materials, like a bluish purple stone, and then a red and a red-brown colored stone, like these. So those are the types of materials that have been referenced to be used in the application. So looking at the building, some of the concerns that the code has when looking at larger buildings is the massing. That's one of the things that the code looks at. And what the applicant has attempted to do here to break up some of the massing, to break up some of the long linear facades of the building, is to use this would be the visible portion right here, facing more or less facing Center Street. But they've used recessing to break up some of the long lines to make the building somewhat more visually interesting, and while at the same time not creating just a plain, I guess, building. The same can be said about the other sides. Again, they use recessing and different materials to break up the long facades, which is something that the design guidelines call for. Sides of the building, again, so this would be the area looking up from Center Street right here, and this would be the side of the building. So again, even on the sides of the building, it's broken up. It's still incorporating the materials I just held up. To continue on with appropriateness in the McLaughlin Conservation District. So again, some more renderings. So if you look at the sides, or this would be the view of the office building from the bluff, so more or less Center Street coming out. You can tell that it's recessed. There's the roof lines over porches, red and gray materials, nothing bright, and that kind of conflicts with the McLaughlin Conservation District's vernacular style. Using recessing on the building to break up the long lines, long facades on the front and on the side, and even on the view of the entry. Again, it's broken up with different materials to make the building more visually interesting, but while being compatible with the design guidelines. Just some referencing from where the applicant has referenced some of these ideas from different buildings in the McLaughlin Conservation District. And here's another thing, is that the idea here is to construct the building to a more of a human and appropriate scale. So when you're looking at the overall massing of the building, if you come up close to a building, are the windows above the pedestrian line? Has the building been designed to not incorporate pedestrians? And even though this building has been recessed and it's up on the bluff, I think the application has demonstrated that even at this distance, they have attempted to incorporate pedestrian design in the overall application. So moving on to the tool storage building. So this would be the building that's connected to the office building on the right-hand side. I can page back quickly if you want me to. Which would be, this building right here. So here's the office building. This would be the tool storage building. So again, using brick and man-made materials, this building will be screened by site screening by vegetation and set back further from the office building, but the applicant has still incorporated appropriate materials, nothing in contrasting the McLaughlin Conservation District's design guidelines. The elevator, and again, the applicant has incorporated colors and materials to be found in the elevator. This will be visible from Center Street. The idea here is to not make the elevator a primary focus, and to kind of incorporate that elevator into the overall site design, and by using like materials to achieve that. Next would be the truck shed. This would be to the other side of the office building, so it's going to be set back even further, and again screened by vegetation. Using similar materials as in the man-made brick and colors, and to be overall incorporated into the entire site. And then reuse of the armory building. So the applicant has suggested or has mentioned that the armory is going to remain. The idea here would be to create a couple more doors on the west elevation, so adding some more doors, and then refinishing the concrete exterior in a different color to make it more appropriate with the overall design. Next, again, some of the materials that I showed here, the ground face CMU color texture samples being red, browns, and gray earth tones. And that's mostly it for my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. I kind of went over it a little bit quickly, just because.
No, I think you did a great job of describing the application. Would you describe your conditions of approval?
Yes. So I would like to get into that. I do have conditions of approval, but there was a initial error in noticing. So that's something I want to address right up front, is that we do have to renotice this application. There was a letter that was not sent to an applicant or to an appropriate party, and that I feel like it needs to be renoticed in order to correct that mistake. So
Okay.
proceed with this in the future. But looking at the conditions of, just to go over them quickly, looking at the conditions of approval, it would be a minimum of 20% landscaping, and then placing trees in front of the office building to help mitigate for some of that increased massing. Screening all the mechanical equipment by either an appropriate fence that met the design standards or vegetation. Fence restrictions, and then what Laura mentioned earlier, sending out a notice in the newspaper, working with the city, coordinating, sending out a notice to see if there's any parties interested in the Camp Adair buildings. So those would be the main conditions of approval.
Okay. So from a procedural perspective, would we be voting on this application this evening, being that it has to be renoticed?
No, but you can
Didn't
still
seem like it.
hear
Okay.
public comment and the applicant's presentation.
Okay. And would the public hearing be open for the next meeting? Okay. It was David. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have a question for staff?
No.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. With that, we'll invite the applicant up. So everyone knows, the applicant will give testimony. Folks who have submitted comment forms will have the opportunity to speak, and then the applicant will come back up for any rebuttal if they so choose. And we'll start your time now.
Thank you for having us. My name is Martin Montalvo. I'm the operations manager for the City of Oregon City Public Works Department, and I'm the project manager for this project. With me today is
David Hyman, principal with Decca Architecture in Portland.
So with us today, we've got a presentation we're going to give you on the site plan for phase one of the project. So that'll be the meat of the presentation. To give you a little bit of sense of context, we will talk briefly about phase two, the lower yard portions of it, but the majority of the discussion will be restricted to the upper yard. So with that, we have an approved master plan from 2009. The differences between the 2009 master plan and the 2017 master plan, significant differences are that we had moved the administrative functions of the plan from the lower yard into the upper yard, and then reduce the number of vehicles that were stored on the upper yard and keep them currently where they are right now in the lower yard portion. This helps us with reducing our overall traffic impact, and almost maintains a status quo in terms of vehicles located in the lower area and utilizing Center Street as their primary access. There are also some other changes that Trevor had already gone over, repurposing the armory, and then repurposing the armory for our fleet facility, and then reducing the footprint of our storage needs by going with the tool and storage building up in the upper yard. So this is the phasing for the project. As you can see, the phase one is basically calls for the demolition of the buildings in the upper yard, with the exception of the armory building. We do intend to try and find a secondary home for the Camp Adair buildings that were referenced earlier. If we aren't able to find a secondary home for them, then we'll work with some architectural salvage components. The second phase of the project calls for the construction of what I call the barn area, the lower yard, to allow us to store our equipment and heavy equipment in the lower area. Phase three of the project, we're including it with the master plan, basically calls for an additional 10,000 square foot storage facility to be constructed at some later date. It's something we wanted to include in the master plan so that our eventual successors have an option to expand in terms of needs. So as presented earlier, this is the overall site plan. The significant things that I think we want to point out in here is the construction of the elevator connecting and bridging the lower and the upper yard facilities. Improvement of some of the stormwater treatment within the overall site grounds. Retention of the rocky outcropping over in the northern perimeter. And then the overall massing of the buildings and trying to keep a nice footprint to the rear as much as possible, but then having our buildings set back and shielded as much as possible. So I'll let David speak to either of these.
Well, this is a landscape plan. and I won't go into a lot of detail, but one of the, we're preserving the outcropping here, the rock outcropping with white oaks. There's some historic white oaks that are there. That's a big change from the 2009 plan. We've got a detention pond over here that's going to be landscaped with drought-tolerant landscape, and a number of detention areas for draining water, for stormwater, retaining as much as we can on site, and then preserving as all of the native white oaks that are surrounding the site, preserving a significant buffer along the bluff. The building is set back about 43 feet from the bluff, so it's not right on the bluff. This is the line of it right here. So you'll notice that as you look up from Center Street, that has an impact on the building is less impactful because it is set back, and also because of the screening from the native landscape. We're preserving pathways into Waterboard Park. We're adding to that. There'll be a public pathway that'll be able to be accessed through here. There'll be another access point to Waterboard Park with parking over here. So those are all amenities that we've tried to maintain and add to in the project. Let's see, how do I do this? That one. This is the lower yard. I won't focus a lot on that. I do want to show some of the designs that we've done for the lower yard, even though it's not part of this application and it wasn't required. We're going through an amendment to the master plan and a general development plan for the lower yard, but we're doing the detailed development plan on the upper yard, but we've gone to great lengths. We just felt that we needed to look at both in order to show some compatibility, and really you couldn't study one site without looking at the other. So we've gone above and beyond in that respect. So here's what I was referring to. So this is the building on the lower side. This is looking from Center Street up. So what you'll see, this is the office building that staff had mentioned and described in very good detail. I don't need to go into that too much, but we also took a look at the lower side because there was a lot of public comment in the meetings that we went to, McLaughlin Neighborhood Association meetings, neighborhoods. We canvassed the neighborhood beforehand. We put out notices to 22 different households and met with 12 and talked to several more on the phone. So we got a collection of a lot of comments, and we reacted to that, and we looked at different ways to modify this building in order to respond to some of the comments that we got. One was a comment about lights from trucks shining through into the neighborhood houses, so we blanked off 2 of the bays that we had previously designed. We set back a portion of it so that we could soften that corner, add landscape to it. We created these sort of carriage house doorways in order to relate more to the scale of the neighborhood. So again, this is not required. This wasn't required of the application, but we just felt that we had to look at both sites in order to really be able to show compatibility between the two and react to different conditions on each one of those sites. So this is also just some thoughts about public art, possibly being able to, in certain areas of the building where there are blank facades, there's a desire to enhance that with some possible public artwork, and it might be, take on different forms, either through boss reliefs in the stonework or applied metal, or it could be some sort of an applied. This is a picture of the kind of ideas that we're talking about. Not necessarily that it would be a mural, but maybe it shows people working, shows some of the history of Oregon City, and that could be incorporated into the building as well. And again, staff went into a very good explanation of this aspect. I'll just point out that we really tried to make the building fit into a historic context, respond to the design guidelines and the historic design guidelines for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and also recognizing that it's a commercial building. And these are images taken out of the guidelines themselves. So we tried to respond specifically to those kinds of elements with a base, a middle, and a top, which is very characteristic of historic buildings, strong cornice lines, warm materials, vertical, historic kind of scale of windows, lots of glass on the ground level. These are all things that we tried to be respectful of the buildings that are in the neighborhood. So this is, I'll just go to the next one. So this is the image that was already shown. Again, it's a building with a lot of shadow lines, a lot of modulation, outdoor spaces. I mean, I think it goes beyond what a typical institutional building would be, and that's what we were really striving for. Strong entry statement, landscape in front. We kind of pulled back the other buildings on the site in order so that you could have a strong, this elevation could be very visible. Materials, again, staff did a good job of explaining all the different materials. We're going to use a split face or a ground face CMU, which is a concrete block, but it's a integral color ground face so that it shows a lot. There's a lot of richness to it, and we're also going to use a pattern that's similar to an ashlar pattern, so it's not your typical concrete block way of doing things. And these are pictures of the actual materials that we're talking about. That's it.
All right. Thank you, David and Martin. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah. Could you speak to the current state of the transition between the site and Waterboard Park, and then what the plan is as far as any changes to that, any fencing or anything that's going to be changed in that border?
I think this will probably give you the best explanation. So the current footprint of Waterboard Park, let's see. So this access road that comes in off of John Adams Street back to here is currently Armory property. Everything behind it and the historic footprint of the old John Adams Road basically follows this line right here. And then beyond that is the Waterboard Park property, and the trailhead is actually right here. So what we're going to be doing is constructing access parking here, dedicated for access into Waterboard Park. We'll also be constructing a new staircase that leads up from the Center Street connection, which there currently isn't one, bringing it up through here and then connecting a new trail connection into the park at this location. In terms of connectivity through the actual site, for security purposes and for safety of our staff and the public, we won't be allowing any more traffic to go currently through the old John Adams footprint. The public right-of-way actually stops here and stops there, and then the public portion of John Adams is currently located through that. So we'll have a gate located at this location and a gate located at that location that'll be accessible by staff during working hours, but then non-working hours won't be accessible. Is there anything else? Does that answer your question?
Does that answer your question?
Two questions. So is the staircase part of phase 1?
Staircase is actually part of phase 2.
Okay. And then is there any fence, and what type of design or material would that be between the sites?
So we're proposing wrought iron fencing around the site in all the areas that are visible. If there's areas that are within, that are hidden in landscape and not visible from any neighborhood houses or from the site, those might be another material. But all of the visible areas that are prominent would be a wrought iron fence.
So it's currently depicted by these dash lines moving right along here, and then also right along there's the preliminary footprint for the fencing.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
No questions.
All right.
Well, I have a question for Trevor. One of the conditions is that any fencing not be of ornate wrought iron. Is that meant to be not a, like...
Right, so just twisted and designed and
Okay.
sculptured.
Gotcha.
And, yeah, it's kind of not the goal of the McLaughlin neighborhood.
We recognize that would be simplistic and tasteful, but appropriate.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. The application was very thorough, so well done.
Appreciate your time.
With that, we'll invite Jesse back up.
Thank you. I didn't think I was first on the list.
And are you speaking on your own accord, or is...
No, I'm here for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association again.
Okay. So you have 5 minutes.
I don't think it'll take that.
Okay.
Actually, because the application, which as you know is quite lengthy, only became available a week ago, I came here to request a continuance, but it sounds like that's happening anyway. So that's really it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then Keith. Keith, are you here? No? Gordon Wilson.
Hello,
Hello.
my name is Gordon Wilson. I'm at 107 Jefferson Street, and I'm just talking on my own. I just had a little introduction, I guess, to support my point. So about this site in 1910, this site was purchased from Harry Jones and his wife. It was 18 acres of land, and the purpose of it was for building a reservoir and a city park. This seems to be going.
I think it's on slideshow or something. Okay.
Slideshow.
Whoops.
The land is situated at the foot of Center Street and extends up to the Falls View, and is one of the most picturesque spots in Oregon City. That's from the Oregon City Courier, 1910. And from 1910 until 1999, this is what Waterboard Park was known as. This whole thing. It wasn't cut out right here. You know, it was this whole thing for 100 years. Waterboard Park was known as that. And if you look at other maps, is this?
Here, I'll do it for you.
Such as this historic heritage site map, again, about 2005, you can see Waterboard Park, still considered this. It's not whittled away. And if you look close up, you can see same thing. It goes from Center Street up to the top of the bluff. Again, another map, Oregon City locator map. Another one? You zoom in, same thing, Waterboard Park. You know, this isn't ambiguous at all. We know where Waterboard Park is. Can you go back to that first one? Right here, this is from the Parks Master Plan, 1999. As I was saying, it's, you know, non-ambiguous. It's not like we don't know where these borders are. You know, we know from Center Street up the bluff. So anyways, it's kind of like this site is within Waterboard Park. It's not like, you know, with Oregon City, to do anything to a park, it has to go to the vote of the people, and that hasn't happened. We haven't voted to take that part out. Like, we've let, you know, Public Works in there because they've been there because we're going to have a reservoir there in 1910, but it still has been a park until about 2005, where those other maps were. Can you go forward? It was always shown like this. On Google Maps, it looked like this, but then around 2005, Waterboard Park started disappearing. Like, it started getting cut away, but there was no vote or anything. So what I'm concerned about putting this development in Waterboard Park is that it violates 1740-10 purpose, number I, carry out provisions of LCDC Goal 5.
And with that, I'm going to have to cut you off, sir.
Okay.
But if you have notes that you'd like to submit as part of the record, we'll certainly take those.
Well, we can keep submitting things till next month, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gordon. And is Keith here? All right. Would the applicant like to come up for rebuttal or any purpose? No. Okay. Thank you. And with that, we could get into discussion, but I don't see the purpose of this juncture.
At this point.
Okay.
Any more? I thought I had it.
I have one for 4B. And is one for street improvement. If you wrote street improvement on the item number from the agenda, was that in reference to 4A? This right here?
Didn't have any idea what
Okay. What did you want to speak on, sir? I'm. Did you want to speak on this application?
Yes.
Okay, come on up. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
my name is Mr. Linker. I own a rental property at 102 and 106 John Adams, just adjacent to the opening of your project, right above where your retention pond will be. And I didn't see anything in the master plan as to what sort of street improvements will be augmented from 3rd Street up to there, and was curious as to, are you going to widen it, improve it? You've got off of Spring Street, there's a stormwater issue currently right there, and it doesn't address any of that sort of thing. And if you do some street improvements, who is responsible for it in front of these different properties?
Mm-hmm. Is that a question for us?
That's a question for you guys.
Well, I can speak generally that the applicant would be responsible for those street improvements if any are required.
You would be responsible for it all, or the city?
The city would be.
Right, okay.
And I believe you would end up paying for that.
Are they
but-
going to have some sort of a drawings or something on this, what kind of street improvements they're going to have?
I'll say that that is outside the purview of this board.
Mhm.
So we are reviewing the historic appropriateness of the construction to be done. Street improvements, parking, that's outside of what we look at.
Mhm.
That would be in the site plan design review, largely.
Design review.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I can offer some clarity on that. There will be opportunity to comment on the site plan and design review. It has been submitted. There has not been a date scheduled yet for that review, but it will be happening. And again, neighbors within 300 feet will get notice, and you'll get notice again.
Okay, that's what I was curious about.
Thank
Okay,
you, Mr.
thank
Linker. All right. And the only one I have left is 4B. So
Okay.
I think we're good now.
All right.
All right. I'm sorry. I almost missed you, sir. All right. So we'll continue this until the next meeting. We'll move on to 4B.
And
Do we need to have a vote on that?
You don't. I don't believe
Okay.
you need a vote, but you do need to give a date and time certain.
Date and time.
So
certain.
the next meeting is May 23rd,
Okay.
and it'll be here at 6 o'clock.
So we will continue this to a date certain of May 23rd at 6 o'clock
6 o'clock
here in this room.
Yes.
And typically you would do a motion and a second for continuances.
So
Right.
moved.
Second.
Okay.
You, Commissioner Basinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Blythe,
Aye.
and Chair Metzen.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay. All right. Now we'll open the file, the record for Oregon City file number PC 17047, HR 03, additions and alterations to an individually listed property on the local register of historic places. Does anyone here have?
I just have a quick question. I never received notice of anything. Am I not in the McLaughlin neighborhood? I live at 457 South Center Street.
Oh,
And none of our neighbors down there received notice.
I believe those within 300 feet receive a
It's
notice.
within 300 feet, but if you write down your name and contact, I can make sure that you get a notice.
Mhm.
We do.
I will do that.
Here.
I'll chat with you.
Okay.
Offline.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Has anyone here had ex parte contact with the applicant?
No.
No. Does anyone wish to challenge that? No. Okay. Has everyone here visited the site?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I'll give them just a second to file out. Okay. So the next application is an addition and alterations to a locally designated landmark located outside of a historic district and the removal of a two-car garage on site. So a little bit of background on this. This applicant wants to update. There is currently a home. It's approximately 650 square feet, and they want to add about 80 square feet to it, making it a grand total of 734.9 square feet, to be exact. So in a couple years, the applicant, just to give you some more background on the site, over the next couple years, it's a long lot, and I'll go to it here in a minute. It's a long lot. The applicant is looking at possibly subdividing in the future, but right now what they want to do is more or less improve the existing home, put an addition on a couple portions of the home, and remove the garage that is currently on the site. So a little bit about the site. It's a 550 by 310 foot parcel located in the northeast intersection of Haram and Rock Street in the Park Place neighborhood. And this is kind of what the aerial of the area looks like. And you can see my mouse. The home is right here. And that would be the home that would be requesting to be upgraded. So here's kind of what it looks like today. Can see it needs some improvements. There's more or less another angle of the home. The garage back here, which would be removed. So here is more or less a floor plan. So you can see the areas that are shaded here at this section of the home. That would be an addition, and then there would be a small addition right here. So these two areas are parts of the home that would be expanded. And these are the elevations received. I believe this portion of the home, go back, oops. Yes, these right here and right here, these areas of the home would be expanded. So here, staff's recommending approval with conditions. One of the big items that we really couldn't make out was that this house is more of a bungalow-style home, and we didn't get a really good front porch elevation. So one of the conditions would be submitting that. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Submitting that front porch elevation, and reviewing it with a more appropriate design using squares instead of circular ornamentation, I guess, in front of beams. Kind of more or less just the standard outline of things, covering the pressure-treated wood, decks, railings, decking, and stairs matching the home, 1x1 windows, wood horizontal lap or channel siding. The applicant, or I'll get in that in a second, receiving proper building permits, and then that big one would be submitting the front porch elevation with appropriate, I guess, posts, square posts instead of the round posts that we kind of saw on this one right here. Right there, which doesn't really match that bungalow style for the period. Other than that, that's more or less the application. The applicant has, so looking at the overall application, the house is going to need a lot of work, and that work is it's going to change some of the home. The applicant has indicated that they're going to replace with like materials, so may not necessarily be wood, but more or less a hardy board, something along those lines, which would be, I guess, a more economically feasible thing, I suppose, when updating a home. So that's what they have suggested. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for staff? All right, and with that, we'll invite the applicant up. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kevin Granger, 16430 Hiram Avenue.
Okay.
My name is Victor, 12504 Southeast Mill Street, Portland, Oregon. And I'm a designer of this addition or change we're making.
Yeah, so as Trevor stated, you may recall we were here back in November and had a couple proposals, but they were not quite what we had envisioned in terms of the historic restoration. So we felt like this was a good representation, and the only thing that I noted in this first part of the presentation was that we do have those elevations for the porch, but I'm not sure what happened in not getting those, but we can certainly provide those anytime.
Do you happen to have them now? So we can look. We can certainly look at them now if you have a thumb drive or something with them on.
Yeah.
You do have a. Yeah, let's see.
The wonders of technology. I like it.
You can carry in your pocket.
So anyhow, we basically went back to the drawing board, and I think if you can see these, you'll be able to appreciate more the fact that we tried to keep it just from the street, so it looks almost, to me, it looks almost exactly the same.
This is a much lighter touch than you had last time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there. So I don't know if you could see that. So if you look at that,
the left hand side is existing. The upper left hand side, and the right hand side is the upper corner. That one is the.
Can we zoom in on that?
Is a new one.
and if you, I sort of appreciated a little bit more from that a view that you had taken, just the pictures from the street view. Because it does have a few posts there, and you can, we're trying to keep them the same look there.
Okay. And it looks like in the conditions of approval, we wouldn't allow any railings that aren't required by code. Is that right? So the railings in between these posts would go away?
Right. That was the idea. Yes.
Okay.
Would it be hard to look at that picture that you have from the street? So you can see there, they kind of have those small posts there. Yeah. And then how the roof comes down, we're trying to keep that same look there. There. So that's kind of where we got it. So you can see right on the far right, that's, in pretty bad disrepair, but you can see it. I think that's what it was intended to be.
Okay.
And then really, just from a practical standpoint, we felt like to make this a viable project, we could give somebody a little bit better living conditions if we expanded it by the 82.9 square feet. And so that's
which is on the back of the house.
Yeah, and it's
visible from the street.
Yeah, it's really, if you look at it from
on
the
back.
back.
If you go one page, previous page, I think previous page. One more. Yeah, that one.
We're kind of just squaring off that back.
Yeah, that corner here
Right.
is going to be an addition.
Yeah, I think it all makes sense from my perspective. The columns in front appear to be a little oversized in proportion to the overall facade. If those were tapered down just a touch,
Okay.
I don't think they have to be as stark as they currently are.
Right.
But it appears as if they're a foot wide in proportion to the house. If they were, 8 inches or smaller, that would probably make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think this is a much more appropriate approach. Yeah, well done, Victor. Yeah. Do we have any other questions or comments? No? No. All right. Ken, any thoughts from you?
Nope.
All right.
I like it.
Unless you have anything else, we'll... Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And we will invite up Miss Merrill. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Paulette Merrill. I live at 16390 Hiram Avenue, which is not next door, but next door.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that anything they do to this house, I'm all for, with the exception from my house. There has been so much development in Park Place lately, and for some reason, everybody has to tear down the garage. And so I am here pleading for the garage. Move the garage, whatever, but people are going to move into that house and they're going to have no place to put their stuff. The person across from me, they had to divide that house, they had to do this. Oh, the garage had to go, and where is all their stuff? Right outside my front door. It's a travesty. I think that garage is appropriate for the house. It's, according to the staff report, it's in the same condition the house is in, which is in fair to poor. And I think that if they're going to put that much effort into that sweet little house, they can prop up the garage, move it over if it's over the property line, and make it something that the people who live in there have some place to put their stuff. Mm-hmm. And plus, that tree is not there anymore. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Would the applicant like to come back up?
So thanks for those comments, because we were kind of thinking the same way. Just when we look at the area, and I've talked to some of the neighbors there, you know, they've said occasionally parking is an issue because Rock Street is a pretty narrow street. So if you saw the, you know, that original garage is in horrible disrepair, and it really can't be used at this point. I mean, it would either have to be, you know, significantly upgraded, or we could put in a new garage, at least a one-car garage. So we did have that as a drawing, but we didn't know how much that would just complicate the effort of getting it started.
Oh, okay. I would say from my perspective, that garage is appropriately placed. It is not competing with the size of the house, which would be my expectation because it's a very small house.
Right.
Typically, we'd ask for a larger roof slope, but by reducing the roof slope as you have, it makes the garage feel much smaller. So the garage doors seem appropriate. There's a lot of moves that you've made there, whether intentional or not, that make a lot of sense. And I would not have issue if that was a part of this proposal.
Okay. Then, yeah, we'd like to do that.
Okay. Is that even an option at this point?
We can submit it to the record.
Okay.
And if you can review it, we would have to. Sorry, I'm not. Okay, so we could submit it into the record. You could review it. I would have to make changes to the staff report and update the findings, but I believe it is a possibility.
Well, okay.
Can we just
we
set
can
it as a condition of approval? Or?
Yeah.
I think we can add it as a condition of approval.
So you would need findings to support.
Yeah.
I presume what's on the computer is some elevations of a new building.
Yes.
And so we'd want to make sure that we do adequate public notice and revise the staff report to accommodate that. So it'd mean a continuance.
Okay. Would you be open to a continuance?
Would it,
Or you could always come in with a separate application and just get this portion started. That's your choice. I will tell you that the makeup of this board is going to change.
Okay.
I'm stepping off after tonight's meeting.
Okay.
And I don't know who will be backfilling this position or the other one that's open at this point in time.
Okay. Well, given the fact that we've just had so many delays, I think we would like to get going on the project.
Mhm.
And I think some of the neighbors that I have spoken with would like us to. So I think I would prefer to go ahead and get started and
Okay.
then come back with the proposal for the garage. Is that okay?
Yeah, we have no issue. That would be my recommendation as well.
Okay, great.
A question regarding the timing then on the demolition of the existing garage. Could that wait until the second application for the replacement garage? Or would
Oh, sure. That's not we could
so
definitely
we
wait
could
on that.
remove that from this proposal?
Yeah, we wouldn't demolish the garage now. That's fine.
If you're asking, then you would have to have findings and a condition of approval to exclude the demolition of the garage,
Yes,
which our report does not have.
I see.
Ken?
So it would also be a delay.
Yeah.
Right?
I understand the practical. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.
And so,
okay.
Should we? We'll just leave it as is then.
We'll leave it as is for
okay.
now, it sounds
Okay,
like.
okay, great.
And we're going to jump into debate. We'll close the public hearing and talk about whether or not to condition you to keep the garage until such time you build another garage.
Okay. Okay.
But if this condition has been approved, so we can move forward and submit it for the building permits, is that what is the process?
I would encourage you to talk to Trevor after this meeting, but essentially, yes.
stick around. I will talk to you about the process, the next steps. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So at this point in time, the public hearing is closed. I understand the practical implication of keeping the garage. I don't really think we have findings to force them to do so.
Okay.
Because it is in disrepair and it's, not actually a historic structure of any importance.
Yeah.
Okay, and if keeping it as a liability, then I'm not for that either. So.
I wouldn't walk in there. Unless you have further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve with staff's conditions approval.
Move to approve HR 1703 with the conditions recommended by staff.
And I will second.
Okay.
Commissioner Basinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Blythe,
Aye.
and Chair Metzen.
Aye.
Motion
Motion
passed.
carries. Thank you very much. So, good news, gentlemen. You have a project. Go forward and swing hammers.
You might give her an opportunity to look at that drawing of the garage, the proposed garage, just while she's here.
And we'll move on to communications.
Okay. Nothing more than what I mentioned the other day, or Oregon City
Yesterday.
Enhancement. Yeah. April 29th, 9 to 12 at Wesley Lynn Park.
Excellent.
And just one more thing, though, is we wanted to say thank you to Chair Metzen for all of his time, thoughtfully looking over applications. HRB is Planning Commission and Historic Review Board are notoriously known as the worst groups in the city to volunteer on because we sort of take advantage of our volunteers quite a bit. And we send you packets of information that are this thick with 1 week to look at it. And it's an important job since you're acting like a judge and you have so many legal responsibilities. And so we really appreciate you thoroughly looking through applications and providing thoughtful comments to applicants. And I think you've done a really good job about understanding changes, and given your history and your job profession, you understand if an ask is too big of an ask or if it's doable. And so we really appreciate that. And we thank you for your service on this board. I think you've been a really good job at just facilitating meetings and making sure that people are clear on the process. And it's been a pleasure to work with you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here for a good amount of time, and it'll be sad not to be here, but hopefully I'll have some applications I get to bring in front of you. Yeah. So we'll stay in touch. And with that, we are adjourned.
Awesome.